You know, I'm a little bit ashamed to admit it, but when I discovered that there were people who chose to raise their children in the Philippines rather than raise them in the United States, they'd had the opportunity to do both, and they chose the Philippines. I was a little bit shocked. And I since have discovered a lot of people who've chosen other countries aside from the U.S., chosen Colombia, Mexico, France, Japan. There's a lot of countries around the world, and for different reasons, some people will choose one country over another. And when you grow up inside the U.S., you're just kind of bombarded all the time with this idea that the U.S. is this wonderful dreamland. And you can understand people that would go to some place similar that's very Protestant and very English speaking, like Canada or Australia. And you can understand why somebody would do that. But to go to a Catholic nation like Mexico or France, or to go to an Asian nation like Japan or the Philippines, it just seems odd to a lot of Americans. And when you grow up in the U.S., I confess, I kind of fell in that same boat. So I wanted to share with you some of the stories that kind of opened my eyes about why people chose the Philippines over the U.S. when they had an equal opportunity. Okay, I've got several of these stories actually. One was a woman that I discovered had been raised since a baby in the Philippines. All her childhood memory was nothing but the Philippines. She'd gone all through school in the Philippines. She went to a very elite school, a school founded in 1611 that recently celebrated its 400th anniversary, Santo Tomas University in Manila. Very super amazing school. Uh, Clearly one of the best schools in the world. If you take the graduates and what they're able to accomplish in other countries, you're gonna have to rank it pretty high. I know it's not ranked high in those ratings, but trust me. So she went all through this school. She got her degree in physical therapy, and she took her U.S. passport because she was a U.S. citizen, and just took her degree from Santo Tomas and went to the U.S. and immediately got a job, started working. Absolutely amazing story. And I kind of inquired a bit about that and found out the backstory. So her mother was a Filipina, met a soldier. I forget if he was a sailor or if he was an airman from Clark or Subic Bay, but somebody that was stationed here. Okay, it could have been a soldier at the hospital at Clark. I don't know. It was probably during Vietnam, so it could have been a soldier that was at the hospital at Clark, and she could have worked there. I don't know. So they got married, and they moved to the U.S. And something happened to him, and I don't know if it was a car accident, or if he had cancer, or what. He had a heart attack or stroke or something, but he passed away. And she was a young single mother in the U.S. And she had the opportunity to stay in the U.S. and struggle and raise her daughter on her military pension and, maybe get a job and continue working. And I'm sure there's a lot of Filipinas that have done that. It's very easy to get a job in the U.S. if you're a single mother. That's really the amazing thing. There are a lot of women I've known that are made a mistake in high school, and got pregnant, and they really struggle here in the Philippines, and they would just love a chance at getting to the U.S. because they'll do literally anything, and they'll be super faithful employees, and they just take off when they get into the U.S. They just do fantastic. But a lot of them are separated from their kids. A lot of them take their kids and raise them as single mothers. Okay, so a lot of people do that. But she chose to go back to the Philippines and have her family help her raise her daughter. And she took her widow's pension from the U.S. military and raised her daughter in the best school she could afford, which was one of the best schools, I think, in the world, Santo Tomas University in Manila. and her daughter ended up marrying a colonel in the Air Force. Absolutely amazing family. I think they live in Germany now. Anyway, fantastic story. So that really educated me about the quality of education in the Philippines, and the fact that if you have a little bit of money, you can really do pretty well here in the Philippines. Okay, number two story. I was in the Philippines visiting my wife's family, and I think it was maybe 2010. It could have been 2008, somewhere around there. I was at the airport by myself, getting ready to board at the gate, and I saw a guy getting ready to go through all the security and everything, and he was just surrounded by people, some of them crying. A lot of Filipinos were with him. And I thought, wow, this American guy with a beard is like a local celebrity somewhere. Maybe he's one of those doctors that come here and do these charity, surgeries or something. So I didn't think anything about it. But when I was at the gate, I saw this guy come up and get on my flight. And I was like, oh, wow, he's going to Taiwan also. So we flew from Manila to Taipei. And I'm wandering around the airport at Taipei. I'm always careful to book a couple of hours layover everywhere I go. I hate having less than an hour to change planes. I want to relax. I want to maybe get a beer, get something to drink. I used to try to mail postcards, but I give up on that now because nobody mails postcards. I don't think you can even buy them anymore. Guam is the only place I saw recently that sold postcards. But I'm walking around Taipei airport, and I go to my gate to make sure I know where it is, and then I'm going to go find something to eat. And lo and behold, who's there at the gate? That same guy. He's going to Houston. He's going from Taipei to Houston. And so I was like, okay, that's it. He's going to Houston. He's got to be from Texas. So, I'm going to start talking to him. And I did. And he was a fascinating guy to talk to, and he really inspired me. And I really don't know who the guy is. I should have kept his email address or something. But he had a great story, okay? He met his wife online at a singles site, okay? And he took her from, I forget where, Quezon province, somewhere fairly close to Manila. He took her from there to Houston, and he lives in Houston. I think he was a firefighter, okay? Fairly good pay, a lot of vacation time, good guaranteed pension. I'm pretty sure it was a firefighter. So they're living in an apartment, and they're happy. And she's pregnant. She gets pregnant with their first baby. And one night, he can't sleep, and he's tossing and turning, and he's tossing and turning. And he finally wakes his wife up, and he turns on the light, and he says, we have to talk. And his wife's kind of in a panic, what's going on. So he tells her that he's sorry, but he doesn't know how she's going to react. But he has to talk about this because this has been going through his mind, and he has to share it. And she's like, of course, share. Well, what's happening? So he tells her that if they stay in the U.S. and raise I think it was a girl, raise their daughter, she's going to have to go to public school. He can't afford the private schools there in Houston. When she goes to public school, she's going to be exposed to all kinds of terrible influences. There's going to be drugs. There's going to be criminality. She might get pregnant. They're going to teach her, promiscuity is a virtue. It's just things that a father agonizes over, for his little girl. If they stay in Houston, he can't afford a nice house. They could get a house someday, but it's not going to be in a nice neighborhood. And they're probably going to be in an apartment for several more years. And the apartment they're at, well, any apartment in the United States, any apartment that I know of, is going to have some crime, okay? So he sighed and he said, if we raise her in the Philippines with your family, I could send money, we could live in a nice subdivision, you could raise our daughter there with your family, and she could go to really good private schools. And his wife started to cry, and she didn't respond right away. And he thought that she was crying because she thinks he wants to get rid of her. But the fact is, she's crying because it was a miracle, and this has been her prayer. She wanted to go back. She was afraid for her daughter if they raised their daughter there in Houston. And she saw what happens to the Filipina kids that are raised there. They end up with tattoos, they end up doing drugs, they end up pregnant. They don't go to college, they don't do very well. Okay, and this is his story. Okay. So he was tremendously relieved, and he got a much, much smaller apartment, and he shared it with another younger firefighter, and they worked different shifts, so they rarely saw each other, and they split expenses, and they paid almost nothing, and he sent every extra penny home he had, so he sent home like, 80,000 pesos a month, and his wife really raised their daughter really well. Every time he got vacation, he'd have extra money. He'd fly there with pasalubong for everybody with gifts. And of course, each time she'd end up having another kid 9 months later. So they ended up with several kids, and he's getting ready for retirement now. So he's probably been retired now for several years. And, they're doing great. And as soon as he retires, he's selling everything he has, and he's going to live in the Philippines. So that was story number 2 that really educated me that somebody would really prefer the Philippines over the U.S. and why. And then I've got a couple of little anecdotes here, okay? A friend of mine is right now in the Philippines, and the husband is from New York, and he just doesn't like the Philippines. He goes on and on. A lot of people in the subdivisions keep dogs in kennels, and they never let them out, and the dogs just bark. They go crazy. And they make a lot of noise, and of course everybody's got roosters, and a lot of people will have karaoke parties, and I guess my wife and I are kind of blessed because we live in a subdivision that doesn't have that at all. my first wife's family in Manila and Pasay and Pasig and Sampaloc districts of Manila, I've never heard anything like that. I've spent the night at a lot of people's houses there. I've never heard anything like that. My wife's family here in Cavite, I've spent many, many nights, weeks at her sister's house in Bacoor, and here we are in Dasmariñas City. I've never heard anything like that. But anyway, this guy just complained all the time about the Philippines. So his wife and their son are in the Philippines. They're actually in Mindanao, visiting her family, and they're going to spend a month, but without the husband, because he's not going to come. She was telling my wife about other people that we know from Texas that are in the Philippines that are actually going to stay. And that's a family with 2 daughters, okay? And the girls are pleading with the mother not to go back to the U.S. Okay, and that's just that's a circumstance that's going to depend on family by family, because I got to tell you, in the U.S., you're not going to have the same kind of help that you're going to have in the Philippines. In the Philippines, your kids are going to be surrounded by love. They're going to be surrounded by people who have that genetic link attaching them biologically to the kid, and I think infants can sense that blood connection with people. I've witnessed it. People that are really good people I've hired from care.com to help us in the house. Amazing people. I really wanted my kids to have a Mexican nanny to help raise them so they'd speak really good Spanish. I found really great nannies. I still keep in touch with them in case we go back. But the connection just wasn't there. Okay, they're good people, but the connection's not there. At a daycare, the connection just is not going to be there. But if you've got a second cousin that's living with you, they're going to sense that blood connection, and you just can't get away from that. So when you're surrounded by family, you've got an aunt, you've got a cousin, you've got a niece, you've got a grandmother. That's all going to stay with you, because if they're staying with you, they can go to De La Salle University instead of the small university college that's in Mindanao. Okay, you know, you're going to be surrounded with all kinds of people that are anxious to help you, and it's going to be difficult to find that quality in the U.S. Now, if you're a really introverted private guy, there's a lot of people like that in the U.S., you're going to hate the fact that 7 people are living in your house in the Philippines. And I got to admit, it kind of gets on my nerves sometimes, because some of these people just show up and they don't tell you that they're going to stay, and they just stay. And sometimes, you know, if you buy really good coffee, it's a little bit expensive, and they'll just make themselves a pot, and they'll be telling their family, "Hey, I like staying here because the coffee's fantastic." And you're kind of simmering like, "Hey, you could have asked, you know, you could have told me you were coming over, you know, what are you doing here?" Okay, you're going to have situations like that. But if your interest is the kids, the welfare of the kids, how they're going to grow up, the education they're going to have, the people that they're going to be around, the Philippines is a pretty good place. You can't have some kind of secret here, because everybody's going to know there's 7 people in the house all the time. Okay, so it's really nice raising kids here, and the kids can sense that security. Okay, and there's no traffic here in our subdivision. The kids can run, they can ride their bicycles. There's guards at the entrance, so they can't go anywhere. Nothing's going to happen. So there's that. Okay, there's a lot of people that we know that want to live in the Philippines, even though they're U.S. citizens and they have the opportunity to raise their kids in the U.S. And on the flip side, okay, there are definitely a lot of people that want to stay in the U.S. Now, when they retire with their Social Security and they're in their 60s, I don't know a lot of people that want to stay in the U.S. when they're elderly. When they retire, I don't. Almost everybody I know comes back to the Philippines. The ones that ended up staying and passing away in the U.S. were the ones that discovered they had cancer or something terminal, and they were too sick to travel back. And that's why they stayed and died in the U.S. So, as an elderly person, I think it's almost unanimous that they prefer to go back and pass away with their family and be buried in their family cemetery, and all that's understandable. Okay, and I've got another fun story about the U.S., okay. This one really took me by surprise, and this is by a friend of mine named Orlando, who's a funny guy. And every Filipino dinner party that you go to, if there's more than 10 people there, somebody is going to assume the role of the clown and just clown around and tell fantastic, hilarious stories. And it's a fun culture, okay. There's always going to be somebody telling these stories. This guy, Orlando, just told hilarious stories. Okay, and this one I think was true. Okay, it might not be exactly true, but it's true. I'm sure it's happened. Okay. Orlando's father works for 2 years to get a tourist visa. They're not easy to get from the U.S. to travel to the U.S. He's going to spend a couple of months in the U.S. He's going to spend, like, I forget, 3 weeks with Orlando's sister in L.A., and then he's going to come to Texas and spend 3 weeks with Orlando. And then he's going to spend a couple of weeks traveling around seeing, Washington, D.C. and New York or whatever. Okay, so he lands in L.A., and he stays with Orlando's sister. And the first couple of days, everything's great. Now, Orlando's sister is a registered nurse and discovered that she can work 3 12-hour shifts a week and get a salary. And so she thought, well, what am I going to do with all this time off? Why don't I get 2 full-time salary jobs and just work 6 days a week? And so that's what she did, okay? And then she had a 1-hour commute each way. So she's gone 14 hours every day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, I think she took Sunday off so she could go to Mass. Okay, on the 7th day, she shopped. She went to church, she bought all of her groceries, and she cooked all day and made neat little Tupperware little dinners for her to take to work and kept them in her freezer. So all she had to do is just get up and take her little Tupperware that she made on Sunday. Okay, so the first day she has off and she spends the whole day with her father and it's a great day. The second day she's working and her father watches TV and he's okay. And the third day he gets a little antsy and he only watches TV part of the time and he's just like pacing around. So by the fifth and sixth day, he's realizing he's going to spend a couple of weeks just staring at the walls in this empty apartment and he's not talking to anybody. Now, if you spend time in the Philippines, you're going to understand that this is really a bizarre situation for a Filipino because they're always talking to somebody all the time. And this is something I never really thought about after traveling back and forth from the Philippines to the U.S. Because when I'm in the Philippines, I'm just used to behaving in such and such a way to fit into the culture here. And when I go back to the U.S., I just assume my normal role. Like I put on my U.S. pants and then I put on my Filipino pants when I come to the Philippines. You behave in a way that you're expected to behave. And I never really thought about it much. But this guy's an older guy and all his life has been in the Philippines and now he's staring at empty walls in an empty apartment in a completely silent apartment complex during the day, every day. So he starts to walk around, and try to find people to talk to. And there's nobody to talk to. So he hangs around at the mailboxes and the laundry. And whenever somebody walks up to do laundry, he walks over and starts to try to talk to him. And they look at him like they're looking at a ghost and they run. They run away from him. And so he starts walking around the parking lot. And whenever a car drives up, he starts walking over to the parking lot with his hand out going, hey, 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 how are you doing? How are you doing? And people get out of their car and they look at him and they run away. And he can't talk to anybody. And people keep running away from him when he tries to walk up and talk to them. And so he starts to lose his mind. So it wasn't even 2 weeks. He still had like another 10 days, I think, that he was scheduled to be in LA. And he called up Orlando and he told him, I'm sorry, I can't come to Texas. I'm losing my mind here. I'm going crazy. Everybody in the U.S. is crazy, and I'm going crazy. I have to go back home. I'm sorry, I'm going back home. And he hung up, and he took a taxi to the airport, and he changed his ticket, and he went back to the Philippines, and he gave up his tourist visa. Now, it's so funny the way Orlando would tell this story. But the funny thing is, Orlando called up his sister, and they really did some detective work to try to figure out what in the world happened, because she was shocked also. And it's really funny, in the Philippines, you're always talking to people. You're talking to the guard, you're talking to the taxi driver, you're talking to the people in the jeepney trying to practice your tortured Tagalog. You're talking to the barber at the barber shop. And you're always talking to people. And then in the U.S., you get on an elevator with 5 other people and you stare at the floor. And then the elevator door opens and you walk away. And you don't say anything. And you don't make eye contact. It's really weird. I never really understood it until Orlando told me that story. My wife, when she first arrived in the U.S., she thought everything was like a zombie apocalypse. Because we're walking around my neighborhood. Okay, I was a firefighter doing 24-hour shifts. So I'd get 48 hours off. So I'd work like Monday and Thursday. And then the next week I'd work Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. And I had all the other days off completely free. So we were walking, all the time. And the streets are just empty, just vacant, And we'd go drive to Kansas City to visit some of my distant family. And we'd go driving around there. And I'd show her the trees, turning colors in autumn, Drive through the city. And she's just like shocked. Where is everybody? She just can't understand it. And it's funny, because where I lived, where I took her was on the Texas-Mexico border. So we'd go into Mexico and she'd see that Mexican kids are the same. And you drive into certain neighborhoods, and a lot of my neighborhood was Mexican nationals. And of course their kids would be playing soccer and basketball and so forth. So she would see people outside. It's just she'd never see white Americans outside. You know, I just never really thought about it. It's funny, you know. And then you go to Walmart, and then your kid accidentally bumps into another kid, and they kind of look at each other, and then the parents rush over and grab the other kid and pull him away real quick. And that kind of struck me because I'd never had kids before. And then I realized how weird that is. And in the pool, when we sold our house before we moved to the Philippines, we lived in an apartment for a while, and we still have that apartment. In the pool at the apartment complex, you go swimming, and the other people in the pool really don't talk much at all to anybody. And that's just completely different here. Just completely different in the Philippines. It's so funny. Everybody talks to everybody all the time. And if you pull your kid away when he's playing with another kid, the parents will look at you like, why? Let him play. It's okay. It's funny, you know. And when you're in the pool, in our subdivision here, there's a big pool, community pool. When someone else jumps in the pool, they come swimming right up to you, you know, and they want to play with your kid. And it's really different. It's really different. I totally understand why some people really latch on to that difference, you know. In France, when people ask you, how are you doing today? They really expect an answer. You don't hear people do the same thing that they do in the U.S. How you doing? Oh, good, yeah. Here, I just want these chips. Okay, thanks. You know. But they actually have real conversations, even in a cafe in France with a cashier. And there's a lot of countries like that. In Colombia, I found out the Colombians are like super literate. There's like poetry, international poetry festivals in Medellin. There's a lot of novelists from Colombia. There's people that read there and they think. And they have long conversations over coffee. And nobody gives them a hassle about, hey, if you're going to hang out here, you're going to have to buy something else. And it's the same way in the Philippines also. So there's a lot of beautiful things about the world. And when you travel, I totally get it. I totally get it. Why somebody might prefer to raise their kids in Cyprus rather than the U.S., even though they've got U.S. passports. I totally get it, you know. It's not that the U.S. is such a terrible place. The gift that the U.S. has is that if you want to work, man, you're really going to be able to work. You really are. If you don't do drugs and you're not going to rip off your boss, you're going to end up doing well. You know, if you can show up on time and just really try to be a good employee. And that's it. That's the beautiful thing about the U.S. You can have 3 jobs. I had 3 jobs for a while. Really puts you ahead, especially if you get along with people and you can have a roommate. But there's really good things about other countries too. It's not a one-way street. It's really amazing when you learn that. Well, have a good day. Take care.